All right, we're rolling.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the one and only Tulsa Uncut.
The one and only.
That's just my favorite part.
I love it.
I don't know.
The intro.
Yeah. With the holiday season upon us, we thought, a lot of people are probably struggling with their mental health for good and bad reasons. So we brought a licensed therapist to the show, Dannelle Newnam. Dannelle, you want to just tell us who you are, where you came from, and
Yeah,
why
absolutely.
you do what you do?
So I have been in this kind of field in general for about 10 years. Quick funny side note, I have 5 daughters, which I think in and of itself qualifies me to talk about anxiety.
Definitely.
So
I have one who has like 5 personalities, so I feel you on
exactly. So multiply that times 5.
Uh-huh.
So, but anyways, I am a licensed therapist. I actually had my own practice for about 8 years, and just in the last 2 years transitioned out of that. And I was referencing just a second ago the show Billions and asking if you guys had seen that, because there's a character in that show who actually, her whole job is to basically keep this set of hedge fund guys in mental like peak performance. And so I saw that show and I was like, oh my gosh, I want that job. I didn't know if it was actually a thing.
That's interesting.
And so I started looking around, and it turns out it is a thing. So that's
a
kind
whole
of
thing.
Really?
Yeah.
So tell us where you're at now. Where have
So
you
I'm at Helmerich and Payne now,
Okay.
and so I'm in the organizational development is my title, but I'm also doing executive coaching. So it's been like an amazing, really cool transition for me. It's so much fun. The people there are just spectacular.
And that's
so,
that's oil and gas company,
It
right?
is.
Okay,
Yep.
that's
Yep.
what I thought.
I'm sure
Okay.
right now they probably do need a lot of mental health checks.
I think, yeah, seriously, but like honestly, who doesn't?
Yeah.
Since 2020, I think the world has sort of. Have you seen that meme that's like, "Where's my handbasket?" Like the world's gone to hell and it has me.
Yeah.
that's
I didn't
so
get
a
my
whole thing.
handbasket.
It's
That's
a whole
so
thing.
true.
It really is,
Yeah.
like for real.
Well, I'm thankful that you were willing to come on the show because, like Trent was saying, we've been kind of talking about everything going on, coming out of COVID, going into this new season. Everyone's going back into holiday parties and all the things and all the sucheries. And now we're going to presents. We're going on vacation. We're going to see our family. And, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
everyone is just overwhelmed and overstimulated. And I often wonder if people feel like if it's just them, they're suffering in their own space,
Yeah, I think we all tend to think that and feel very alone in whatever state we tend to be in. And to your point, Lauri, I think it's interesting because it seems to be one extreme or the other, right?
Yeah.
Either people are extraordinarily lonely and they don't have family or friends or resources or whatever. And so that in and of itself, that isolation or that profound sense of aloneness, especially at this time of year, is
Right.
extremely difficult. Or you've got the other end of the spectrum where, people are so like overwhelmed with all the things that we have to do. And then also maintaining a job and, maintaining relationships and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's a lot. It's
It
a lot.
is. It
Either end of the spectrum. And I just feel like for whatever reason, this time of year magnifies it.
Yeah.
Right. And we see, suicide rates go up. We see depression going up. We see a lot of mental issues happening, and they come to the surface usually about this time. And that's what we don't want it to be a scary thing. We want to talk about the taboo and talk about it a little bit. One of the things that you and I were discussing is the difference, because sometimes people categorize mental health as mental illness, and there's such, a stigma on all of it, and there doesn't need to be.
Right.
People can talk about their weight, people can talk about acne, people can talk about all these things, their finances, they're going bankrupt. People
Right.
can talk
Right.
about that, but it's almost like I feel like people who struggle with any kind of mental issues, whether it be illness or just health, they feel like they can't talk about it or it's so taboo.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about the differences, because there is a difference between mental illness and mental health.
I think that those terms are used interchangeably.
Okay.
So, however, the way I would define the difference would be if you have issues that are impacting your behavior or the way that you're moving through the world, then we would call that mental illness of some sort. However, if you think about the word illness, I think that's where people get hung up, right?
Right.
Because if you have a cold, you have an illness. So,
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
there's a whole spectrum, a range there in terms of like intensity of what it is that you're dealing with. So, you could look at, okay, first of all, are there any one of us who have not dealt with some level of anxiety?
Dude, all the
Like
time.
for real,
I've
can
never
say
been anxious. I'm just kidding.
Okay, then you deal with lying.
I'm
No.
just kidding. Yeah.
And your illness
And
is
mental
you're a
illness.
liar.
Yeah.
Exactly. So literally, to be human and alive means that you will deal with some
Yeah.
measure of mental illness because
Sure.
we have to, navigate the world. So I love the fact that you're kind of highlighting that it's such a stigma. It should not be.
Right.
And I think we've come a long way for sure. And honestly, even since COVID, I think we've come a long way in recognizing that everyone is dealing with higher levels of stress. Funny little side note, men call anxiety stress. And women call it anxiety, right? So that's kind of the euphemism. But stress is anxiety. It's fear of whatever the outcome will or will not be based on what you do or don't do. So
Trent, when you're watching football, you are experiencing anxiety.
Yeah.
That's what she just said.
Yeah, especially this season. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. So I guess just normalizing the fact that everyone has it. And
Yeah.
I know I keep referencing COVID, but that really was a difficult, time for all of us. And since 2020, the anxiety and depression rate has skyrocketed. I mean, like World Health Organization says that it's gone up 25%. Professionals would tell you it's gone up way more than that,
Yeah.
but 25% is a lot.
It is a lot.
Wow.
So
That
it's,
is
it's quite a
wild.
bit. And then if you look at the impact to relationships and stuff like that, divorce rates went up about 35% in 2021,
Holy crap.
which were already high, so it's a real problem.
So I think a lot of it is, when you're struggling with your mental health, whether it be anxiety or whatever label we need to put on it to make whomever feel better. But when you're in those places, a lot of it is we have bad coping mechanisms. So we turn to drinking, we turn to other addictions, whether it's smoking or partying or whatever it is. It's not common that someone's like, oh my gosh, I'm super stressed out. Let me go take a hot bubble bath and read my Bible. Like, you know what I'm saying? Some people do maybe.
Yeah.
But like the reality is people have bad coping skills.
Yes.
And so when we're talking about things like coming into the holidays, Dannelle, like what are some things that you think we could be doing or people could be doing to start mentally preparing or sharpening those skill sets?
So I think the first thing is exactly what we're doing right now, which is recognizing that it's okay and that you're normal if you start feeling that. So, for some reason, it's hard to recognize a lot of times where we are personally. Like you can see it in someone else much more quickly a lot of times than in yourself. I'll never forget. It was like 6 years ago. I was driving. I have, lots of kids, and I think that they were at 4 different schools. So I'm driving one morning, and I'm just like, and I remember all of a sudden it hit me. Oh my gosh, I'm a single mother. Like I had been single for like 2.5 years. That was the first time I like labeled myself as that. And as soon as I recognized that I actually was one, I was like, well, no wonder this is so hard,
Right.
So it's that same type of mindset that we don't allow ourselves to be weak, right? Or we acknowledge it as weakness rather than just a state of being that we happen to be in at that time. And so I think that's the first thing is just like taking inventory of where you really are, not where you think you should be, but like where are you really? And are you feeling, there's certain physical traits that we feel when we're anxious or when we start to be depressed. And so like just paying attention to your body cues is, and I know that again, that sounds like very therapist-y, but like, are you having a hard time catching your breath? Are you like, breathing more shallowly? Are you getting headaches? Are you having trouble sleeping? Are you just struggling
Emotional
with
highs and lows?
Exactly.
Are you freaking out when your child's like, hey mom, can we Grubhub? And you're like, no, we cannot Grubhub.
Yeah.
I just went grocery shopping.
Exactly.
If you're freaking out, like it's
that's
okay.
a sign.
That's
yes.
a sign.
Yes.
You-
Like I call that a level 10 response to like what would really be a level 2, experience or
that makes
something.
sense.
So if you're having way over the top kind of reactions or responses to things, it's probably because you're just feeling overwhelmed and like you've got too much going on. So that's the first thing. Just like take an honest inventory and just be real about it.
So look yourself in the mirror a little bit.
Exactly.
How do you get out of that mental block of you're just you have blinders on, you're so focused on your life every day, other people, that it's almost impossible for you to like slow down and evaluate your own self. How do you like snap people out of that?
So one of the things that I like to do, because if you say, how are you doing? to somebody, of course they're going to be like, I'm fine.
Right.
Just
Everything's super.
Exactly.
Right.
The answer that way, I would say, I'm good. How are you? But when I look at my own life, I try to break things down into categories because it's too big a question if you just say like, how am I actually doing? Right. So I use these little categories that I've used probably since college when I think about that. So I'm like, how am I doing physically? Like, am I getting enough sleep? Am I struggling to sleep? Do I feel, am I on a good routine or pattern? Or like, am I sick to my stomach? Is there something that's off physically? How am I doing mentally? Like, am I clear-headed when I'm making decisions? Or am I finding it like I'm kind of scattered and feeling like I've got a million things running through my head at one time? How am I doing emotionally? Back to your thing, Lauri. Like, am I way over responding to things that don't warrant that?
Right.
And then spiritually, am I in alignment with my values? Am I living according to my values? Do I feel connected and in touch, personally for my own beliefs? And then, how about professionally? How am I doing professionally? Am I struggling to keep up at work?
Right.
Am I feeling like completely overwhelmed? Like, I look at my schedule and I feel like I'm gonna have a panic attack. Like, that's not a good sign. And then lastly, I look at relationship dynamics because I think that's a huge cue for a lot of other things in our lives. Like, how are my relationships going? And if they're not going well, is there some, common theme there? Is it because, again, maybe I'm overreacting to things or whatever that looks like?
I think that's a good point, and on that note, in your relationships, my thing is when you're in these spaces and you're anxious or you're feeling like you're drowning or suffocating, those are words that people use a lot. I'm drowning, I'm suffocating, I can't think. Who are the people in your life that you can lean on? Because I think that there's also the stigma of when I'm in this space. I mean, I know I've done it. Like, I'll just be super transparent. I've done it where I'm like, I don't need anyone's help. I got this. I am super mom. I, like you, I'm a single mom, 2 kids, one who has an amazing personality and one who's more chill,
right.
But asking for help and leaning. And I've had to learn this past few, I would say months probably, to lean on those people going into these holidays because we've got these events, we've got work-life balance, we've got family dynamic balance, we've got, oh my gosh, I'm emotionally checking out, I'm freaking out. And leaning on those people and knowing that it's okay to ask for help.
Yes.
Does not make you a weak person. It actually makes you stronger because you're identifying the fact that I can't be the be-all, end-all.
Exactly. I think that 3 of the most powerful words in the human language are I need help. If someone says that to you, does that not kind of stop you in your tracks and you're like, whoa, what's going on, right?
Yeah.
It makes you really lean in and pause. So I think using that phrase it's very difficult. We're kind of taught to like be independent and, like you said, not need anyone. But the reality is we all do. We all need other people. We are biologically hardwired for that. So we need it.
I had someone explain it to me as when you're asking someone for help, 9 times out of 10, that person, that relationship, that friend that you have is eager. They want to help, especially if you are the independent, overly, I can do everything on my own person. Giving them the opportunity to help you is oftentimes their gift.
Absolutely.
And so you're technically robbing someone else of their blessing to you by keeping that line severed because you're trying so hard to be this superhero of a human when really a lot of people want to help. A lot of people want to, extend and be there for you, and you letting them in makes them go, I'm valued. And so you give them the opportunity to give the gift of caring.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because they're not going to unless you open up the door first. They don't want to cross a line and offend you.
Right.
So it probably makes them feel important. Like you care about their opinion and who they are in your life, relationship wise. So it does make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I'm speaking on, as a single chick, but like Trent, you and your married life, I'm sure that like when your wife is freaking out, she's spent all day with the kids, you're coming home and doing what? You're helping, right? Yeah. You're like, talk a little bit about that as far as, you naturally go into that fix it mode kind of as a dude, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a struggle because I feel like, she's been home all day with my daughter and, being home all day in and itself, you get the cabin fever and then you get taking care of a kid. And right now she's sick. So taking care of a sick kid and then like say I'm out all day working like 12 hours or something, and I get home, I'm tired, she's tired, so there has to be intentionality like on both sides to like recognize that we're both tired for different reasons. Like she needs a break from the kid, she might need to go take a shower and just have some like alone time. I need to step in and help with homework or whatever, and it's not easy, but it's just the reality.
I feel like that is the hardest phase of life, honestly. It's exhausting physically. And there's no days off.
Right.
So
for sure.
I totally get that. Yeah.
Hashtag welcome to parenting.
Exactly.
They said it would be fun. They like.
true.
No, I'm just kidding. It is fun. It is fun. I'm kidding. Okay. So as far as, we've got taking inventory.
Yes.
Acknowledging, hey, I need help.
Right.
I need help. Two big things going into the holiday.
Yep. So another thing I would say is, and I every time I say this, people are like, "Oh," you get the eye roll, right? But like, exercise is so important, and there's a cumulative effect to anxiety. So it's not just like you flip a switch and oh my gosh, now I'm anxious. It's your body literally builds up stress and anxiety hormones. Okay. So over time, you may have that one little event, that proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. Yeah. And then maybe you have a panic attack, or, thankfully not everyone experiences that. Those are horrible. I've experienced that before. But getting to that point is kind of the point of no return. Like once you're in that, you have to just ride it out. Yeah. So I really focused in my practice on helping people recognize the signs that it was coming and things to do to be preventative toward that.
What are those signs? You knew that was coming.
Yeah.
Could you feel it? I was like, well, then let's
like,
talk about it. Yeah, because I'm like, what are the signs?
Right.
I might be experiencing it.
It's good to educate people on that, because I had I guess it's an anxiety attack or whatever at my old day job. And I had never experienced anything like that, at least in like my adult life. And I thought I was legitimately having a heart attack. Yeah. Like I lost feeling in my left arm. My blood pressure was insanely high. I was like lightheaded. My chest hurt. And I went to the hospital, got an EKG, and they did all this stuff, and they're like, "You're fine. We think you just
have anxiety that you thought was killing you."
Yeah,
I mean, it's not a just, but yet thankfully that was, the diagnosis, not a heart attack, but that's what it feels like. It
would have helped my anxiety if I knew that it was an anxiety attack.
Exactly.
Because now you're stressed out about the fact that you're possibly dying, and you're like, I'm dying, and
right,
just raising my anxiety.
Stress.
Look, we're all on this train.
Exactly.
So
great analogy I use is a roller coaster, right? You sit on a roller coaster ride, you get strapped into the little, and that metal bar comes down, it's like, go. Now you're locked in, you're like, oh crud, here we go. And there's always that hill right at the beginning. So this is how I picture anxiety. An event will happen. Like I said, it could be big or small, but it could be whatever the last straw thing was. And now you're going up the hill. So everybody has different ways that they physiologically respond or react to anxiety. So it could be, like I said before, your fingers could get numb or tingly. You could have shallow breathing, feeling like you can't catch your breath. Dizziness and lightheadedness is a common one. Pounding heart or heart pain or kind of symptoms that you would experience with a heart attack are common. Nausea is common. This one's not necessarily a physical response, but it's I've got to get out of here feeling, like, oh my gosh, I got to get out of here. And so just that would be the flight, portion of it. Right. So there's all kinds of different cues physically, but if you think about a time when you were extremely anxious or stressed out or worried or scared, whatever, fill in the blank there, think about how your body felt, because there are always cues to it. And I think we are not in tune enough with our own bodies a lot of times to recognize what our personal cues are. So if you can just take a little short minute and just think back to a time that you knew was really challenging, think, what was my body doing? Like, was I struggling to breathe? Were my hands tingly? Like, what was it? Because there's common ones, but there are ones that are very specific to each person as well.
As you're explaining this, though, here's the funny thing, and here's where my mind's going. We're talking about, being mentally checked in. The feelings that you described, though, are very similar to another feeling that we call excitement.
Absolutely. Fear and excitement physiologically are almost identical.
So are we saying that mentally we can actually possibly control some of those feelings as far as changing the dynamic of how we're thinking? I'm not anxious, I'm excited.
Sure. I think that's about a level 10 skill set.
I mean, I'm ready to learn,
But
sister.
yeah, like, I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is
Okay.
to embrace adventure and the unknown with a measure of excitement. Of course, we all need some measure of certainty in our lives. And when we hit the tipping point of too much uncertainty versus too much certainty, that's where anxiety becomes problematic. So again, just paying attention to those cues. But I love that you're exactly right. That's 100% accurate. So, when you recognize those things are happening, you have a little window of time to stop the roller coaster. Okay. So as that thing continues to accelerate, you can get to that point where it's literally what I call the point of no return, the top of the hill, where you're like, oh crud, we're going over, like this is happening. And at that point you have to just hang on and go through it, unfortunately. And it's awful. But if anyone is ever in that, moment or that point, and they don't stop it ahead of time, and it does turn into a panic attack, my assurance for you is, like, it doesn't last very long. It feels like an eternity if you're in it, but you will recover and you will be fine. So I just want to throw that out there. But a couple things you can do in the moment if you feel that starting to happen. And I know this is extreme, like this is extreme anxiety in a moment, right? But this is going to sound very silly, but do some jumping jacks or push-ups or run in place, because again, we're talking about stress hormones that are building up, your cortisol, your adrenaline starting to like accumulate in your body and preparing you for a life or death situation where you would want to run or fight against an actual physical threat.
Yeah, because isn't stress and anxiety actually an evolutionary trait?
Yeah, it's a survival.
Like we're about to be
trait.
eaten by a tiger.
Yes.
So it's like fight or flight, the stress and anxiety all hits us. But now because we've, as a species, we
don't have
where
bears
we
chasing
are.
us,
Right.
usually.
We're in a cubicle.
Right.
And we have a deadline and we're about to lose it. So
yes, but your brain doesn't differentiate between
Right.
psychological stressors and actual,
I'm going to be eaten by a lion.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
So it is a something we don't want to get rid of, that because it is a survival instinct,
Right.
and it's important if you ever were in a life or death situation to have that kick in. You would want that, but obviously we don't want that to happen in the mall or or something like that,
or at the middle of our Christmas dinner at Grandma's house,
right?
When
That
Aunt
could get
June
awkward.
comes in acting like a psychopath. We
Right.
don't want that to happen.
Maybe we should normalize people just randomly doing
Freaking
jumping
out.
jacks.
Yeah, or jumping
Just-
jacks. Exactly.
They're in their office doing jumping jacks at 2:30 in the afternoon. Just don't ask questions. They're probably
just know they're
curving a
anxious.
panic
I
attack.
mean, feel free if you want to
yeah.
start this game.
Exactly. I like this movement we're talking about here. Yeah.
Just do jumping jacks. We're not going to judge you. We're actually
Right.
going to know that you paid
No
attention to the
judgment
show.
jacks.
Yeah.
That's what we'll call it. No
Yeah.
judgment jacks. I've actually had to do that after a particularly stressful counseling session where I was like, holy cow, this family was in there and they were a handful. And so they left and I literally shut my door and just did some push-ups. And
Oh,
the
wow.
key is you just want to get out of breath. Like you
Yeah.
don't need to do it for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like just elevate your heart rate enough that you're getting rid of some of those stress hormones and just get a little bit out of breath and then you're good. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, if it's not feasible to jump, I mean, what if you're sitting in church or in the middle of a meeting at work? You can't do jumping jacks.
I mean,
Although
I mean, you could.
we
but-
we endorse it.
yeah,
Sure.
exactly. So if you can't do that, another really helpful thing to do is control your breathing, which again sounds very simple. It's not if you're in the moment, but if you can do that, you're going to by default start controlling your heart rate, and everything is kind of geared around your heart rate. So taking a deep breath, and you don't have to be very dramatic about it. I mean, you can do this if you want to, or you can just be like very,
pulling it together.
Exactly. No one has to know. And then the final thing that I recommend is, because that's going to take care of the physiology, but part of it, and this, Trent, if you've gone through this, that your mind is like running a million miles a minute, right? And so the way I describe it when I had panic attacks was, it was like I couldn't even capture a thought because they were coming so fast. It was like ping pongs going around in my brain. And so what you want to do, all of the brain function has left the frontal lobe, which is where all decision making and all executive function happens, and it's going back to the amygdala, that fight or flight center of your brain. So all you have to do to shift focus back to the frontal lobe is count backwards by threes from 100.
You're
Again,
kidding.
it sounds super
Oh,
simple.
wow.
Is it difficult to do in the moment?
It
Trent, go
can
ahead,
be.
please.
Yes.
I'd like for you to start, starting with 100. Go.
All right, 99, 98, 97. Do you pause?
Well, you can do it silently. You don't have to.
Oh, okay.
But by threes,
But
right?
by
So you
the
would
reason
skip
you do
three
it by
numbers,
threes-
Oh,
right?
so 197.
You do it by threes
Okay,
because
94.
it's a tiny bit harder than twos.
Okay.
Like that's something we've probably memorized early on.
Sure.
So that doesn't require enough thought. You want just enough
Difficulty.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That you have to kind of put some focus on that frontal lobe again. But it's not so hard that you're, like trying to do a
Yeah.
complicated
I don't
math
know. I'm no
problem.
mathematician. I got 97. What do you
You've
got?
got to do calculus backwards.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I
Shift it
can't.
all.
I'm like
Yeah.
97.
Yeah.
Three.
But that's probably good, right?
It is
Yeah.
good. Again, it forces you to focus on
the
a
frontal lobe.
specific thing
Wow.
and brings attention to the frontal
That's
lobe.
really interesting. You know what I love? Of the solutions that you're proposing, not once have you mentioned like to medicate yourself, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Although I don't know if you should. Some people should,
Okay,
or
so
if there's
I
supplements.
am not anti-medication. However, I believe that it is a bridge, not a solution, right? So like some people have a giant chasm that they're trying to cross during
Yeah.
divorce, or if you've lost a loved one, or maybe during the holidays, if you have to visit
Right.
your family, whatever your stressor may be. There may be heightened times in our lives where it would help to kind of get over the hump, so to speak, with medication. The problem is, I think, to your point earlier, it can become a crutch that we become dependent on,
Yeah.
if not physically, certainly psychologically. And so my goal is always to teach yourself to overcome it. Because, like, for example, I was having lots of panic attacks for a long time around the time of my divorce. And because I taught myself these skills and learned to stop it before I got over that point of no return, what I started to do is develop a history of success, of overcoming it. And then I started to develop this confidence that, like, okay, I got this. I can do this. And once you start recognizing, like, you're not battling yourself as much as you are, the way I like to envision it is like, personify anxiety, make it something external, right? That you're kind
I
of
like that.
battling against, instead of thinking,
It's me.
I'm an
Something's
anxious
wrong
person.
with me.
Yeah. I am an anxious person versus I am a person who struggles with anxiety or who wrestles with that. And so I think you don't want it to become part of your identity, is my whole point with that.
Okay.
So it's just like something that you look at out here and you're like, okay, here it comes.
Yeah.
We're going to deal with this and we're going to conquer this little situation.
Yes. It's easier to fight something that is seen and known than the unknown, right? And so they use that in therapy with children a lot, where they'll make them draw a picture of their anger or, something so they can actually visualize it. So, a lot of people, it's helpful to even visualize what anxiety looks like for you, so that when you kind of are going through this process of breathing or doing all the things that you're like, you see it going a step further every time that you go through your counting of 3 breaths or whatever. But just visualizing it.
And using, they say like the power of your words. So instead of saying, I have anxiety, you don't use it. You're like, I'm having an episode with it, or I'm struggling with it right now, or right. Like you don't keep it as something that you hold near and dear.
I don't like to identify people with dysfunctions, right?
Yeah.
So, and I feel like I am a big believer in the power of words, huge believer in
Absolutely.
that. And your brain processes everything that you say, and it goes into your subconscious, and you begin to develop core beliefs about yourself, about the world around you. Am I safe? Am I good enough? Am I okay? All those things are deeply embedded in your subconscious. So you're either confirming those things with your words, or you're developing healthier new mindsets.
So we should probably watch what we're listening to. Does that mean no more Nicki
Absolutely.
Minaj? And, I mean, like,
I
I just
mean,
need some clarification.
Pro
Just kidding.
self.
No, I love
whatever
Nicki
that
Minaj.
looks like.
I'm just kidding,
Yeah.
Nikki, if you're listening.
Well,
Just
it's
kidding.
if you happen to be
Yeah.
listening.
she's definitely
Nikki.
listening. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel like we have to be vigilant about guarding our minds. And you know yourself better than anybody else. So like one of the things that my children love to make fun of me for is I don't like scary movies or things like that, because I know that I happen to be very sensitive to that kind of stuff. So I will just guard myself from it. It's just not worth it to me to have input that I know is going to create negative output. So I tend to be pretty guarded and vigilant about that. So again, that's a personal journey, and one that it requires knowing yourself and understanding what your own we'll call them triggers. I love that word. What your own triggers are. So anyway, back to our original question. I would say That's why I am a big advocate for exercise. And I don't mean like you have to be a bodybuilder or a marathon runner, but just getting your heart rate up and just staying active helps continually kind of deplete some of those stress hormones that are building up over time.
I feel like that's a cheat code to it, because I learned that about a year ago when I had my, or I guess more than a year ago now, but when I had my day job, I got to a point where I would just, at lunchtime, I wouldn't even eat lunch. I would just eat in my office before lunch. Then I would go work out for 45 minutes. And I learned that you can be too tired to be anxious. You get home and you're like, I'm too tired. Like,
I
I'm
don't have the energy for this.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of learned that about myself.
I love that.
Just work out.
Yeah. And it releases endorphins.
Yeah.
And it can help you burn off the bird.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, there's
It gives
so
you
many.
confidence
There's so
and all
many
that stuff.
benefits other than just the way that you look. It's how you feel about yourself. It's not just the taking care of the negative, but it's also promoting positive things in your body.
And checking what you're telling yourself. So, for instance, let's talk about Christmas. We're going into the Christmas holiday. If your mindset now already is, oh my gosh, I've got to go do Christmas and all of my family and crazy Aunt June. I just know she's going to say something crazy and I'm just going to leave. Like, if you're already giving yourself this narrative, your brain is already beginning a freak out sesh. So let's change what we're thinking. Like, you know what? I'm so excited to see crazy Aunt June. I can't wait till she says something off the wall about my sweater. Like, it's fine. We all know that crazy Aunt June is going to say something nuts to somebody. Let it go. Let her be crazy. Like, my favorite phrase right now is let them.
Oh, I love
let
that.
them. Because it allows us to stop taking so much concern about everything else around. Let them.
Yes.
Like, if they're going to do that, let them.
Yeah.
Because how we react is a choice.
Absolutely.
How we go into it cognitively thinking, emotionally, that's our choice. And we can choose to tell ourselves, I'm anxious, this is going to suck, I hate this, blah, blah, blah. And your mind goes, okay, that's what it's going to be. Or we can choose to go, you know what? Let them.
Yeah. Because that's what you don't have control over.
Yeah.
Is
So
what they
let
do.
them.
So, yeah.
That's
Let
so true.
them.
I mean, if you think about how much control, honestly, that we even have over ourselves. I mean, how many New Year's resolutions fail within the first month? Like,
Oh, yeah.
First
we
week.
are the first week, first 12 hours. We are literally in charge of ourselves, and yet we can't hardly make changes within our own, habits or bodies or minds or whatever, much less being able to control anybody else. So I love that phrase, but I 100% agree with you. And it does always come back to, what is your response going to be? That's the only thing you have control over in most situations. That, and what situations are you allowing yourself to be in?
Right.
And so I will say, when it comes to holidays, I like to give people permission to really evaluate what is a healthy situation for them to be in and what is not. And
Let's
it is
go,
okay.
girl.
It is okay to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to opt out of that. Even if it's family.
Can we
Sometimes
say that
families-
one more time? Seriously, guys, like, if you get anything, like, let's load up on this one, because people don't do this. So it's really, really important, because people are like, well, that's my family. But there are so many caveats. So will you please say that one more? Give everyone this
Yes,
permission.
I give you my permission to opt out of family action and activities this year. Although that's probably going to come back to bite me. But no, it's true though. I think that some of the most toxic relationships obviously are family dynamics, unfortunately. And I hate that, but it's the reality of life sometimes. So I think understanding what is going to create a lot of emotional damage for you and learning how to set appropriate boundaries. I mean, I can't tell you how much of my therapy practice was simply boundaries. Like, what are appropriate boundaries to set for yourself? And people just don't feel empowered to do that for some reason.
Because
especially
they won't
with
let
family.
them. They won't let them,
Yes.
because you know what? We go into that and we're already like, I have to go to this because this person will be disappointed. How they feel about your boundary is not your business.
No.
Set your boundary and leave it. Because the thing is their reaction is not your problem.
Right.
But if you feel like they are causing their behaviors or their lack of respect or their lack of respect for your boundaries are causing you to feel some kind of way that's unhealthy, you have the right and the due diligence to yourself to say, no, I'm not going to put myself in a situation that I'm uncomfortable with because you continuously push on my boundary.
Right.
So I'm going to let you do that over there. I love you.
Yes,
But I'm
exactly.
out.
And that does not have to be unkind or
No.
aggressive or any of that kind of stuff. And I think that people associate that with this harshness or hardness, or it doesn't have to. It can be done in a very loving, kind way, but also, very firm.
It's saying I love you enough,
Yes. And also I love myself.
but I love me more.
I love me. There's a song about that. Yeah, it's true. So anyway, I think that's another thing. And then you were just talking about, which is literally, this is one of my favorite subjects, is our thought, our what we allow ourselves to dwell on and our perspective of things, and how much power we have right here that we just acquiesce to everyone around us or whatever situation we happen to be in. We just give it away. And so I think recognition that we have that level of power is important. And then also recognizing, where are we holding ourselves back? I mean, I believe with everything inside of me that our biggest limitation in life is not our families or our upbringing or our, relationships. It's us. We are the biggest factor that holds us back, period. So being able to understand and acknowledge, here are my negative thought patterns that are impacting me consistently, is step one, and the easiest way to do that is journal. And I'm saying all these things that everybody's like, go exercise, go write in your journal. But they say that for a reason. They are very effective things that you can do. And you will start to recognize, if you journal on any kind of consistent basis, there are themes and patterns to your thoughts, to things that bother you. And, you'll start to recognize that as you see it kind of on paper. There's something very cathartic about taking all the jumbled up stuff that's going on up here and literally like transferring it to paper. I mean, paper is non-judgmental. It doesn't talk back to you. There's so many things that are good about doing that.
It's like you're collecting data on yourself.
Yes, you really are.
Over time, you
really
can analyze it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
If someone says, I don't know how to journal, like, do I write, dear journal? If people don't know how,
I'm glad you said that, because I think it becomes overcomplicated. And I always tell people, it doesn't even have to be sentences. If you just want to write phrases, or like an incomplete thought that comes to your mind, or a word that just you keep coming back to that's bothersome to you, or a person's name, and just start there, write it out, and then think on it and figure out, why does that bother me? And then once you get a phrase or a sentence, write that down. It can be so simple. Some people draw pictures to express whatever's going on mentally in their mind. But I think it's more the process of formulating the thought with enough like solidification to be able to write it out is important. Like I said earlier, I think we have all these thoughts kind of going through our head, like, I'm a single parent. I never strung that sentence together.
Yeah.
But when I did, I was like, oh my gosh, well, no wonder. Like, this is why it's been so hard. And it was such a relief to actually be able to formulate a sentence that explained why I was feeling the way I was, as simple as that is. That's the best example I can give, though.
It's giving yourself, it goes back to giving yourself the permission.
Yes.
The permission to be real enough to write it down, draw it down, whatever. But give yourself the permission to have that complete space to where you're like, I know this is dumb. I shouldn't be freaking out over this, but I am. So let me give it a space where we can talk about it.
Right. And then beyond that, I think, if someone is really genuinely struggling and it's been more than 3 or 4 weeks, that's the time to start going, okay, maybe this is beyond the scope of what I should just try to continue to manage myself. And there is 0.0 shame in asking for help. We talked about that at the beginning, whether that's from a friend or even a therapist. And if you do go to a therapist, I will tell you, it's kind of like dating. You may have to go to multiple ones before you feel like you connect with somebody. You have to feel, when you're in therapy, that you can trust that person and you can build rapport with that person, and you have to feel safe to like really be able to say whatever it is that's going on. So I tell people, if you've tried it and it just like wasn't your thing, maybe it just wasn't a good fit, and maybe you just need to try
or style, because there's so many different kinds.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've got the neurofeedback. I know that our friend Erin does Splonkna.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different approaches. I think people
Yes.
are like, well, I don't want to go to a therapist because I don't want them to put me on medication, which I get. But not every therapist is going to be out there writing you a script.
Well, no, and honestly, therapists can't even prescribe medication. They can tell you if they feel like you are in, like, I would do that a couple times. Like I said, if there's a giant chasm in front of someone, I would recommend that they would go to their family doctor or, talk to a physician and say, okay, I feel like I'm in a position right now where I need a short-term boost, a little bit of help to get over this. I need to build a bridge, right? Yeah. And then once you're kind of out of that crisis mode, then you can start utilizing all these other skills and kind of help making progress that way. But there's a time and place for it. There really is. But anyway, so, finding someone that you can trust is very helpful. And there's all kinds of different methods and, theories out there in terms of how people approach therapy too. So if you didn't have success the first time, maybe the next time you will.
Yeah. And if you find, I think, the honesty is if you're finding yourself going to coping mechanisms, when you're in this fight or flight mode, Dannelle, what do things like alcohol, drug abuse, what do those things do to the mental state, to your brain as you're going through this?
Well, what you're doing is essentially teaching yourself, this is my relief button, right? This is my
panic
go-to, that this is my escape hatch. And so the more you do that, the more repetitively you do that, you're creating neural pathways in your brain where at some point then it just becomes an automatic and you don't even think about it anymore. And that's what we call habit, right? So here's a fun and or scary fact, depending on your age and how mentally and emotionally healthy you are. By the age of 35, 93% of our thoughts and actions are on autopilot from one day to the next. Meaning when you do enough repetition of any thought pattern or any behavior, your brain goes, okay, I'm going to conserve energy. Your brain takes about 20% of your body's energy on any given day. So in order to conserve energy, it will put certain things in autopilot so that you don't have to continue to put thought to them. If you know it's going to be, I drive the same route to work every day. I brush my teeth from the right to the left. I tie my shoes this way. You don't think about those things anymore. You just automatically do them, right? If I told you to write your name on a piece of paper, you would pick up your pen with your dominant hand and sign your name.
Right.
Doesn't mean that if I said, so now sign it with your other, that you couldn't.
Right.
But it would require your brain to engage in a way that it doesn't necessarily normally do, because that neural pathway is already set to your dominant.
That is wild. Hand. That is interesting data. So by the time you're 35, would you said it's
93%
93%
on autopilot.
Wow.
Which again, I know it can be scary for some people if you're not thrilled with your day-to-day thoughts. And this is why these negative thought patterns become so ingrained, and you start to identify as, I'm an anxious person, or I'm just depressed, or I'm just a loser, or I'm lazy, or I'm whatever, fill in the blank. People come up with all kinds of self-descriptive, things that they say about themselves, even if it's just in their own minds. And I would say we would never let someone talk to us the way that we talk to ourselves most of the time. If you think about the things that you allow yourself to think about. So just food for thought.
Wow.
Again, it's not that you can't change that 93%. You absolutely can. We have neuroplasticity from the day we're born until the day we die.
So there's hope.
There's always hope. There's always hope. You can always change it. It just requires a lot more work to do that, and being very intentional about it as well. So,
do you think it will ever be possible for us to, by using technology, alert us when we're about to have a panic attack? Because like an Apple Watch can tell you your heart rate is up. For
sure. If you know the physiological symptoms that you have, you could probably do that yourself. I mean, I love, actually, that would be a really cool app. Next business idea.
Get busy, sister.
But for real, I think just recognizing that, okay, I'm starting to feel a certain way. And then if you looked at, for example, your Apple Watch and you saw that your heart rate was starting to climb, that would be a key indication that, okay, it's time to do my jumping jacks. Right?
They should program that on the Apple Watch. Like,
They
your
really
heart rate
should.
is going up. It is time for you to do 10 push-ups.
Yeah.
I mean, it tells you when to breathe.
Right. Or when to stand
drink
up
water,
when you've been sitting too
and when
long.
to fill a circle.
Yeah, exactly.
Why can't it tell me that I'm about ready to lose my junk at work?
Exactly.
It's time for push-ups.
It would be fascinating because you could probably take a sample of like 1,000 people, do a study, figure out what the most common symptoms were for everyone that had an anxiety attack. I guess in that sample you'd have to make them have an anxiety attack to measure
or just
it.
talk to someone that's had one.
True.
Boy, you could tell me probably exactly what you were feeling. I could tell you what I was feeling.
True.
It's not something that leaves your brain very readily.
And I get and then when all 5 of those symptoms as variables come together, it could like alert you or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
That would
I
be
mean,
kind of
or,
interesting.
guys, listen, every hour on the hour, we just need to do 5 push-ups.
Yeah.
I mean, get it
There you
together.
go.
You're going to have amazing arms, back,
Seriously,
and core.
you are going to be ripped
fine.
and happy.
You're like, what are you doing? I'm checking on my mental health right
Yes,
now, and I'm going to
exactly.
need 5 push-ups.
Yeah. Well, and you could also use like the Likert scale. You could say on a scale of 1 to 10, what is my stress level right now? And you could do this like in the morning, at lunchtime, and as you're winding
The
down.
problem is, though, with that realistically, is people can't do that. That's the problem. Is because we're so conditioned to function and highly function under so much stress, especially with the last few years of COVID.
Right.
We're all really good at functioning stressed
Absolutely. Your baseline continues to rise, and you start learning how to develop the capacity to manage it at higher levels until you can't, right? And that's when people have nervous breakdown, or you hear people burning out at work. Those are essentially people that were not paying attention along the way to their own levels of stress, and and obviously you kind of run off a cliff at some point, unfortunately. So
What do you say to people that belittle this topic, or don't have sympathy for somebody? So you had a boss, and his, you have an employee on the floor at Amazon or something. They're stressed to the max.
Yeah.
But you just don't take it seriously because you don't really subscribe to the idea that mental health is really like a thing.
I can't, like, it's hard, honestly, Trent, for me to imagine somebody just having no capacity to understand it. I know there are people like that.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people like that. Yeah.
But what I feel like that is just denial more than, and maybe even their own fear of acknowledging some of the things that they have going on, naming it. I mean, I bet those people are also stressed out, but they don't want to call it anxiety, because that's a term that we associate with weakness. Stress, we associate with high productivity and someone that's a hard worker, and that's a positive. Like, ooh, I'm so stressed out. I'm so busy. I'm overwhelmed with, all my things that I'm accomplishing. And we look at that as a badge of honor. Whereas if you say, man, I'm really struggling with anxiety today, it sounds like a weakness. And again, I think the tide is starting to turn to where it's becoming more acceptable to call it what it is. But this is just a cue for all of us. When someone says, man, I am really stressed out, just like have them pause and go, are you okay? Are you really okay?
Right.
Not just, how are you? But like, are you really okay?
Or the caveat, oh, me too.
Right.
They're, a lot of times that's they're saying, I'm not okay. I'm really not okay.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we need to learn to really lean in harder. And you can tell a lot of times, if you're paying attention, you can tell when someone's not themselves, right? And so just being mindful of being a good friend, a good coworker, a good parent, a good daughter,
human being,
son, whatever,
maybe.
a good person.
I mean, like, I think about it a lot. And I'm like, if people would just operate a little bit more often from a state of grace and realize that it's okay, number one, to not be okay. And it's okay that other people around us, they're not okay either.
Right.
So be in tune, be empathetic, but operate from a state of grace and realize, man, we can slow down long enough to care about somebody.
Absolutely. And I would also say, I love what you're saying about it's okay to not be okay, but also I want to take that one step further and say, if you recognize that you're not, don't stay there. Do something to help shift yourself out of that. Because I will say, the longer that you stay in a pattern of anxiety, the more likely you are to shift into depression. Yeah. And then once you're in depression and you stay there long enough, your brain does actually change chemically. So then it does become a more physical issue. So I really encourage people to catch this on the front end and recognize that it's cyclical, right? Like, we're talking about holidays right now, which are innately, stressful. So just giving yourself more time to sleep, extra Saturday mornings where you take an extra long walk, or take a longer shower, or, have a conversation with a friend over coffee. Just like scheduling those physical and mental breaks
health break
is huge. And just we talk about intentionality all the time, but that's a huge one.
Be intentional with yourself.
Yes.
I went through a very traumatic thing last month. I lost a very dear loved one and it was traumatic. I go into the holidays stressed out and anxious. I lost my grandmother in December. I lost my father in December. So there's a lot of heaviness that surrounds. And then now I lost this person dear to me. And, you know, I was trying to do I literally felt like I was a circus monkey. I'm not kidding. It was the weirdest thing. I felt like I have to just perform and I have to be okay and I have to show that I'm strong and I've got this. And inside I was breaking. And it literally took someone who I haven't even known, not even a year. Good friend of mine, Brandy, or of ours. And I was on the phone. She was like, "You're not okay." And I was like, "I'm not, but I don't have a choice. Like I've got to do these things because it wasn't because of my job. It wasn't because of the people. It was because of my own mental way of, I guess, what I thought I was coping by staying busy." And she goes, "You know, you really have got to stop. You need to stop today and you need to feel this. And if it takes one day, if it takes 3 days, but you need to grieve. You need to feel this emotion. You cannot throw yourself into work. You have got to give yourself permission to not be okay right now and take a breather." And I was like, it was the weirdest thing to know. It was like, huh? As soon as she said that, I turned my car around. I went home. I did the hot bath thing and just sobbed. And, you know, I called her days after this happened and I'm like, "You have no idea what that did." I was literally at a mental breaking point where I thought I was okay functioning in this weird, not okay space, but still doing the circus monkey thing because that's what the expectation is. You know?
And you were probably using it to distract too.
Distract instead of feel.
Right.
Distract instead of acknowledge, which is kind of what made me get on this thing of how many more people are experiencing, whether it's at that magnitude or any other magnitude, because everyone has a story that's happening or something that's going on. But even acknowledging that and giving me permission because I couldn't give myself permission in that space.
So what you're describing is part of the grief cycle too. It's that denial portion of it where you don't want to actually have to stop long enough to face what you know is going to be the inevitable onslaught of emotion that's going to come. And we all have our own, whatever our own vices are for dealing with that. Again, in our society, there are certain ones that we deem acceptable. Overworking, right, is like, oh yes, you get a gold star for that one. But if you go out and get hammered every night, then, you know, you're an alcoholic and now you're just a loser, right? So I mean, like, we have all these labels that we put on people based on whatever their particular vice is. So in that scenario, thank God she gave you permission, you know. And to your point, we need to be gentle enough with ourselves that we are our own advocate. In whatever situation we're facing. And that is way easier said than done because sometimes it does require facing things that we would rather ignore.
And that's exactly where it was easier almost to ignore it than have to swallow the reality.
It doesn't happen. Yeah.
But once that happened, it was weird because I spent that time and then it was like, okay, nothing is better. It's not easier. I still don't want to accept it. However, emotionally and mentally, I can cope with it a little bit better because I allowed myself to have the permission to acknowledge I'm not okay.
Yes, exactly.
I'm really not okay, and I do need some help. And so I started calling some people that I'm like, I'm not okay. Can you just come over and just let's talk?
Good for you.
And finding those things. So, guys, the whole thing about this show today is really acknowledging that it's okay wherever you are, whether you're coming up the roller coaster, whether you just got on the crazy coaster, whether you are fixing to go down the hill or on the hill. Yeah. It's okay wherever you are, but talk about it. Reach out to someone, acknowledge it, give yourself permission to be okay where you are and figure out ways. And you could reach out to Dannelle. She'll take it. I mean, she will.
For sure.
But reach out and really check your mental space before you get there. So this is going to launch before Christmas. It'll be this week. Yeah. And so mentally prepare yourself, whether it's get up in the morning and start doing stretches. You don't have to work out and sweat. My goodness, I know some of us do not want to mess with our hair.
Although you should.
Every day. Although you should. Yeah. But even just stretching, get yourself in a mental pumped up space where you're like, this is actually going to be exciting.
Right.
I'm going to have so much fun watching this show at my family's
Yeah,
house.
exactly.
Like, whatever.
Yeah, but then you're not feeling reactive to everything. You're living in a more proactive way. I'm a big fan of like guarding that first hour of your day to do the things that are for yourself, whether that's exercise or, you know, some spiritual exercise, praying, reading your Bible, whatever. Journaling is a big one. Reading in general, just like before the day hits you, that you get yourself in a space where you're like, I've got this, you know, whatever is coming.
And that doesn't mean roll over and get on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I feel like everyone does that. Yeah. You
Don't
wake
do
up.
that. It's a bad habit.
Even if you could just give yourself a 30-minute window from the time that you woke up before you start looking at your phone and what's coming at you that day, and do something intentional during that first 30 minutes to, you know, meditate or write out your goals for the day. I'm like there's a million things you can do that are so productive that, again, get you in a position to deal with things in a healthy way instead of feeling like you're constantly, you know, on your heels all day trying to react to whatever's coming at you. So.
And if you don't know what to do, get on a podcast. There are so many good podcasts you can listen to while you're showering, while you're making your coffee, while you're just laying in bed. I mean, there's meditation music. I mean, there's all these different things that are highly accessible that aren't Facebook.
Right.
That aren't Facebook, yeah.
I mean, no
That's a good
offense. We
point.
love Facebook, but
Yeah, it's a necessary evil.
It is.
Facebook
It
is,
is.
Instagram and all that.
Right.
but it immediately puts you in a headspace that's probably not your best because you're like, oh my gosh, look, so and so was up at 4:30 at the gym and she's doing.
Right.
And their Christmas tree looks perfect, and their kids look perfect, and their meals look perfect.
Oh my gosh, there's an
Their
ad for
life is
matching
perfect.
pajamas. I
Yeah.
need to get matching pajamas. Now I'm over here freaking out on
Right.
Amazon because I need matching pajamas.
Yeah. It's just
It's
the
a whole thing.
competition thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there was something I wanted to ask you about is the neuro feedback.
Yes.
I want to know what that is.
Okay, so
Seems fascinating.
it's pretty interesting. So this kind of goes back to not throwing medication at everything because you can actually solve things physiologically in terms of brain function. So the things that I really focused on when I had that practice was anxiety. As we're talking about today, it's I mean, anxiety, sleep issues, and ADHD were kind of my 3 focus areas, which if you throw that into any crowd, about 75% of everyone has one of those
I would
things or
imagine,
more.
yeah.
So anyway, what you do is essentially retrain the way that your brain functions. So you're changing brainwave activity essentially over time. It's not like a quick fix. It's kind of like what we were talking about before. You're creating new neural pathways. Your brain learns to function differently, to react differently to certain things. So it is a wonderful tool to use for all kinds of different dysfunctions that, you know, range from, like I said, anxiety, depression, sleep issues, just lots of different things that you can help. Even if you're talking about peak performance, like being more mentally sharp, you can use it for that as well. So
Is it something you physically put on your head?
yeah. So basically it's these little sensors that pick up what your brain is currently doing. And then there are norms that are established for brainwave activity, just like there's norms for heart rate and blood pressure and that kind of thing. So
Is that norm unique to that person? It's like a control?
it's unique to gender and age range.
Oh, okay.
So like women between 20 and 25 would have a certain norm.
Okay.
Okay. So children's are different than adults, and you know, so you would want to compare the right age range. So, but basically, it's the greatest type of therapy because it's so simple. You watch a show on a screen, so
Really?
Some type of program, whatever you like, movie, whatever, and as you're watching it, the equipment is responding in real time to what your brain is doing. Okay, so it's based on operant conditioning, positive feedback for desired behavior. So as you're watching the show, if your brain is outside of that normal range, the screen will start to get dim. And so your brain will start going like, how do I get that screen bright again? It's not a conscious thing. Your brain does it in millisecond times. So it'll start to adjust, and the millisecond that it gets back into the normal range, the screen will brighten up. So there's the positive feedback for the desired behavior, which is staying in that normal range. So that process happens thousands of times in a 20 or 30-minute session.
So this is, you're training your brain. It's like you're training the subconscious side of your brain.
You're training
Right.
the unconscious side of your brain.
The unconscious.
In other words, the function that's happening unconsciously without you being,
because there's no way you
thoughtfully
could.
aware of it.
Yeah, there's no way you could be aware.
Exactly. In fact, I tell people as they're going through that, like, don't try to manipulate this, because by the time you're seeing a shift on the screen, that's already happened. Like, that's old news. So just relax and let your brain do the work for you. And so it feels like a very passive therapy that's actually really amazing.
And we get to watch any show? Like,
So
a
I
show
don't let
choice?
people, I
Okay.
wouldn't let people watch something that was like scary or violent or something like that, but something that's pretty neutral.
Like Love
Absolutely.
is Blind. That's my favorite
Love
thing
is
on
Blind.
Netflix.
Yes.
Do you watch that?
I do. And also
Okay.
Married at First Sight.
I
was
love
it?
that. Finished it.
Yeah.
I can binge watch those babies.
Me too.
Listen, me and
Yeah.
anyway, I
Yeah.
won't get into
Yeah.
my personal business.
I would
but
just-
I love those
I do too.
shows.
I would just put The Office on. I watched The Office.
That's a good one. Yeah,
A lot.
that was a popular one. So,
Wow.
but it's a really cool, type of therapy for sure.
That's so
I had
fascinating.
done counseling with this particular person for, I want to say, almost 3 years, and he had so much trauma in his childhood. And so we would, try to work through the different things, and he made progress a little bit, little incremental bits of progress, but I kept telling him, this will help you if we combine neurofeedback with counseling. I
Yeah.
promise you'll, and he was nervous to do it. And I understood with all of what he had gone through in
Sure.
his life that there was some trepidation there when we talk about, like, we're going to change your brain. He's like, what? So I finally talked him into it, and he did it. And within 3 months, we made more progress
That's
than we had
interesting.
made in the previous 3 years.
How do
Just-
you
wow.
how do you measure the progress when you're doing the neurofeedback? Is it the TV goes less dim less times?
No, because what we have is it's set to a certain % reward. So even as you're, think of it as leveling up in a game system. The levels become harder the better you get. So you're just continually refining that new brain function.
Wow.
But what you do is you measure at the very beginning. You do an EEG, so you can look at the entirety of what the brain
and that's a
function
map
looks
of
like.
the brain.
It's basically a
function.
map of the brain.
Okay.
And you look at it at the beginning, and then you do one at the end, and you can see differences in terms of brain function from
Whoa.
the beginning to the end. So
Whoa.
it's very cool.
Where could I go do that tomorrow? How do you do that?
So
Yeah, we'll do it right now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm
And
kidding.
pull out the bag.
As a
What
matter
you
of
didn't
fact,
know,
yeah.
Trent, is we are going to put you on.
This is an intervention.
I
no,
so
I'm kidding.
would. If we had
Yeah.
it here, I would so do
Your wife
it.
can thank me later.
Yeah, yeah,
It's so fascinating.
yeah. It's very cool.
It is really
So
cool.
there's places to do that though?
Yes.
Like locally?
Yep.
Okay.
Just to
look that
know
up.
that the brain is so malleable and able and capable of doing great things. And
Yes.
so you're never at a point of no return.
That, if there's any message in all of what we're talking about, it's that there is never a point that is hopeless ever. There's always opportunity for change, and there's a lot of different avenues to get there. But I would say if anyone feels a sense of hopelessness during this season of time, find someone. I don't care if it's me. I don't care who. Find someone who you can say, I need help to, and let them be that hero for you in that moment.
Yeah. Because you are loved and you are valued. And we want you here,
Yeah,
no matter who you are.
exactly.
So, yeah,
Easy.
please reach out.
Easy on the no matter who you are. I'm just kidding.
Okay, so maybe don't call Trent.
We'll
No,
have a
just
short list of people that Trent does not want.
please submit here. Just kidding. Well, I appreciate you and all of your knowledge.
Yeah.
And,
Thank you.
Yeah.
and sharing and coming in and really
where can people find you? Like on social media and
yeah,
stuff?
I mean, I am on social media some, but Dannelle Newnam on Facebook, and then same on Instagram. And I also have a business account on Instagram at OK Neuro, as in neurofeedback. But now that I've kind of transitioned jobs, I'm not like posting on there as regularly. But I have a lot of ideas for the short upcoming future that I may start posting on there again. So
yeah.
but yeah, those are a couple ways you
Yeah.
can reach me.
I've seen the videos on your Instagram on the OK Neuro one.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I think they're beneficial for
Thank
sure.
you.
So before we sign off, I just want to say, try not to be anxious and let's get excited. Let's change our words just
Yes,
a little bit. Change your
exactly.
Yeah.
vocabulary, change your mind, change your outlook.
Yep.
Control your mindset as much as possible. And if you feel like you can't, I mean, you guys can always reach out to me. I'm here to talk positivity.
There you go. As soon as you reached out to me, I was like, I don't even care what it is. If Lauri's involved, I'm in. So there you go.
That's
I knew
sweet.
it was going to be awesome.
No, we appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a very happy holiday. And seriously, all jokes aside, you're not alone. It's going to be okay. We're all going to get through this. And 2023 is going to be better.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. Cheers to that.
All right. See you guys. Thanks for joining Tulsa Uncut.
See ya.